What's up, guys? So this is Bama Jaybird Resell. I'm Josh. It's good to be back with you today. Going to look at some items that were going out from the weekend. 13 orders for $494.42. In addition, we're going to be looking at a topic today. The question: can you make a full-time income by reselling on eBay or just reselling in general? Is that feasible for you? My situation, your situation may be different, and everyone's got to take into consideration a lot of different factors. Now, I by no means think that I know every factor that you need to consider, but I can give you some of the ones that I've thought about over the last couple of years as I move closer to my decision. And maybe it can help you as you begin to think through these things and try to reach a decision of your own. And, while I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I've only been able to really devote a lot of time to it for a few months. Before, it was more of a hobby. It was in preparation for this step of possibly one day becoming full-time. But as I've shared with you in a previous video, all of that has become accelerated due to my mother's dementia and the need for myself or someone to be available to be there for her, for support, to look after her on a more consistent basis. And so that definitely factored into my decision. So as we begin to look at the sales today, as well as the topic, which again is whether or not it's a good idea to maybe quit your job and become a full-time eBay reseller, I want you to just keep in mind that everyone's circumstance is different. And what works for one or is good for one person may not always be good for someone else. And so with that said, let's take a look at our first couple of items that we sold over the weekend. I've had better weekends, but I've definitely had worse. I didn't have any huge sales. I think my largest sale, most valuable sale, was only $50. But I believe my average sale price was somewhere in the $25, maybe to $30 range, something like that. Or at least maybe my average profit per item was around $20. And so the first one, it's a pair of Levi's 527, 3130. I'll put a picture of that up on the screen for you. These were a pair of pants I gave $2.50 for at a local thrift store. Sold them for $19, so a decent profit on those. Then I have a two-pack. I did a lot of two of these shirts. They're called Hang 10. It's kind of like a surf/swimming shirt. It's got the sun protectant built into the fabric. They're really cool. Got a zip pocket like for holding some of your valuables and things like that. But these are a women's extra large. There were two of these. Interesting, nice prints. And they sold for $22. Now, each of those were, I think, $1.50 if I remember right. Now, the place I got these, clothing items are typically $3 across the board, but on this particular day when I purchased these, they were doing a half off sale on all their clothing. So it was $1.50. So I had $3 in it, sold it for $22. That's about $19 of profit, not counting taxes and things like that. And we might discuss a little bit. I'm not great at this yet. I mean, I do kind of keep up. I've just not done the precise figures, for sharing in the past for videos. But I did try to kind of get an idea of what I actually sold the item for, not the price with the shipping as eBay shows you, but the price I actually sold it for. I went back and looked at my shipping cost on each of these items and looked at how much I got from shipping, because oftentimes, as you know, if you're an eBay reseller, what it charges the buyer is more than what you have to pay. But that kind of covers some of the extra costs. Like, we had to buy shipping materials, bags and boxes and packing paper and bubble wrap and things like that. And so that's why when we've ordered in the past, like when I was a kid, it was shipping and handling, because there were other costs that were understood that were associated with the idea of ordering an item from like a catalog at that time. I mean, it was a long time ago, right? And then having it shipped to your house. But anyway, the next item is another pair of jeans. They were Wrangler jeans 3832 retro slim fit. So these I sold for $15. Had $5 in these. This is the Wranglers. This is the Hang 10 shirts. This is one of them. This is the pattern of the other. Really nice fabric that's used for those. And then, of course, the Levi 527. I don't know if you can really see that or not, but 527 3130s. always a good idea to measure the items that you're selling when it comes to clothing. I like to, and I may show you this in a future video, I just use a yardstick, you know, for 90% of my measurements. Every now and then I have to use a tape measure, but mostly I use a yardstick, which means I have to snap more pictures. But once it's laid out flat and ready to go, it really doesn't take that much more time. But I'll show you what kind of measurements to take for a shirt, what kind of measurements to take for a pair of blue jeans in a future video. And one more item I'll show you before we get into our topic. And so this next item is a polo shirt. It's a Nike Golf Polo, dry fit. It's like that royal blue color, but the thing that set this one apart is the fact that it had the Pepsi embroidered logo on it. That particular shirt, the Nike Golf Polo, the Pepsi, I sold for $18. I gave $7 for it, so I'm not making a ton off of that, but I do make a few dollars. I mean, it's a very, very small profit margin time you factor in all the other expenses. So probably not my best buy, but it's just hard to pass those up. I haven't had that shirt listed, but maybe 2 weeks at the most. They always move pretty fast. So even if I just make $3 or $4, I'm happy with that. Let's talk about our topic for just a minute. Let's get into the first part. So the question again was, can you make a full-time living on eBay, or maybe just from reselling in general? The short answer from me to you, the thing that I would like to say first is, you know, just being honest, probably not. A lot of this has to do with expectations. I'm afraid that too many people watching videos like on YouTube, they get this impression that if they start going and buying a bunch of stuff at Goodwills and thrift stores, they hit up yard sales and garage sales and go to flea markets, that they're automatically going to just be making hundreds and then thousands of dollars as they get items listed on eBay. And that it's just easy, that it's just this right there in front of you. And so, look, when your knowledge base is big enough, then it does get easier to make a profit. But I would say that there's definitely some really important things that you need to consider before leaving your full-time job. Now, of course, you know, this is coming from someone who just recently resigned from a job teaching high school, which I had done for 18 years. So I don't say any of this lightly, and I didn't take this lightly myself. And my circumstance, like I said, probably different from a lot of yours. Everyone's circumstance varies, and you have to factor in what your particular situation is before making any kind of decision like this. Like financially, I know this for a fact. Financially, we would be way better off if I was working my job teaching, doing this on the side, making what I can out of it, and putting all that together financially, that we could really make a lot more progress, say, toward becoming debt free. But when I say probably not, some of the factors that I think you should consider is like health insurance. If you are the primary or only income earner in your household and you make a decision to begin reselling full time, then you need to make sure that you're not only making enough money from the reselling to replace the income, but the other things that full-time job affords you, like a health insurance plan. This can be very costly. I mean, there's lots of options out there, but you're pretty much going to be well over $1,000 for some of the more basic options and up that you're going to be putting out yourself still. You know, I know a lot of you pay toward your insurance. You're probably like, well, I pay $300 every pay period already, or $400, but that's different. You know exactly what you're making, what you're bringing home. And so most people think in terms of, can I replace the bring home money, not can I replace the insurance. You have to make enough to cover that bring home money plus enough to cover that insurance cost. So that's a really big one. Another one is most jobs that we work publicly, they provide some sort of retirement. I know my job that I had has a pension system through the state. Many other jobs have 401k plans. And while it may not seem really important while you're younger, if you don't think about retirement while you're younger, you won't have a retirement when you reach that age. And so if you're leaving a steady job that offers you these types of benefits for reselling, you need to think about pretty quickly, how can I navigate this new career so that I'm also planning for my long-term future. Another thing that I would like to mention when I say the probably not is most people value income consistency, like knowing what they're going to make, or knowing that, okay, this is my baseline pay, and if I work X number of hours over and I need extra money, I can get that extra money. And I would say one of the things with selling online is it can be pretty inconsistent at times. You may have an amazing week where you just make tons of money and think, oh, I've really turned the corner now. You know, things are really going to start picking up and they're going to be great. And then, you know, the next week, it's like you go 2 days and nothing sells. You're like, oh my God, what has happened? You know, has it shut down? Have I been blocked? What's going on? So, you know, you've got to be careful with income when you resell or work for yourself in general, because you never know when jobs are going to become slow or hard to come by, or in the case of reselling, when the market's going to have an effect, maybe like it has recently, and greatly slow things down, or new platforms and new methods of buying, like the Temu thing, right? So every time they introduce some new platform for buying that draws buyers away from other selling platforms, it affects sell-through rates for all sellers. It can have an impact. Now, granted, there's certain items and products, certain niches that may not ever be affected that much by something like a Temu. But if you're like me and you're a variety seller, you sell everything, then you got to consider that, because there's always the chance that it can have an impact on it. Two last things. I'll be quick with these on the probably not. One is access to inventory. Finding consistent inventory is a really important part of becoming a full-time reseller, because you can't be up and down if it's your source of income for paying bills. And then last, as you look at the idea of becoming full-time, you've got to think really seriously about, okay, do I have the space to accommodate this? I know a lot of resellers will go rent storage, and that works. I mean, when you're making enough, that can work. But storage costs a monthly premium. I really think that, if you can avoid having to pay rental fees, that's probably a good thing, though not everyone can do that. In some areas, the cost of living is much higher. And again, that's another issue that we'll get to later in trying to factor in and make this decision. All right, let's look at a couple more items that sold. Our next order going out was a Wrangler men's pearl snap. You can see that here. Sorry for the lighting, by the way. I'm doing the best I can. I've got to get another light. The space that I'm in right now is not the best for recording. Hopefully when I get the place for mom finished, as I've started that little video series, I'm going to be adding one to that this week. But as I'm working on that, one of the parts of that space is actually going to be a new eBay space for my resale business. And I hope to have it set up a lot better for not only storage and processing and listing and all that stuff and shipping, but also for making videos, to be a more pleasant, background, a better lit area, a more permanent setup for filming where I don't have to worry about these things. All right, but anyway, back to the sales. That Wrangler shirt sold for $19.50. I gave about $6 for that. So not a huge profit, but again, a profit nonetheless. And I'll take profit at this point. Sometimes again, and this is one of those, these denim Wranglers, if you get the right one, they can sell for a good bit more. And some of the vintage Wrangler shirts that have, like, whether it be Aztec or some of the bright colors, man, they can go for lots of money. I mean, they can be really, really expensive. You know what I mean? From $50 to $70 up to, well over $100 or even more, depending on how rare it is and what the size is and how good a condition it's in. I've actually got a video about that I'm going to be posting hopefully in the next couple of days. It actually may come out before this video, but I was at a local flea mall, which I don't go to a lot for sourcing, but the garage sales have been kind of dead, and wasn't having a lot of luck with thrift stores. So we decided to go to something different. And to be honest, there wasn't a lot in there for me to buy for resale. But I did stumble up on one booth in particular where they had some of the really just very, very cool Wrangler brush popper, old style, vintage 90s pearl snap shirts. And man, I think I'm going to make a lot of money off of those. A lot of them were only $2. And I mean, I'm talking, I saw sold comps for one for $150. Now I gave $8, I think, or 8 or 10 for it. It was the only one that wasn't $2 that I bought. It was crazy. Like all of a sudden I'd been finding nothing, and then bam, just out of the blue, I run up on that. The next item on the list, we have a pair of Rock Revival cut-off denim shorts. Rock Revival, if you don't know, is a very good brand. It's one to watch out for. Generally, anytime you find Rock Revival in good shape even, I mean, you're going to be able to sell it. If it's in great shape and doesn't have any issues, I mean, it's probably going to sell for $50 or more, most of their items. It's very, very good. And some of them sell for much more than that, upwards of $75, $80, or maybe even $100, depending on cut, style, that type of thing, and what the item actually is. So someone else had cut these off, but I did all the measurements, took the photos, posted them. They've been listed for about maybe a week and a half. It's not been long. This is one of the more recent items. I pulled this from one of the last bins that I've filled. These particular cutoff shorts only sold for $20. I think I had them listed for $27.99. Someone offered me $20. I only had $6 in them, so I went ahead and took the sale. I'm not going to make a killing off of these, but honestly, I was glad to sell them. It's getting, toward the end of summer. I see an uptick in sales sales for like jackets and long sleeves and sweaters, and a lot more watchers and interest on those things. And the number of sales and interest in, you know, short sleeves, summer type clothing, things like that is really starting to drop. So I was glad to get these out the door, make a few more dollars real quick before the last of the summer is over. And then the next item, a pair of Levi's. These are 501s. These are a 2930. Now, I measured these, and these actually measure 2829. That's why it's important to always take measurements. If you want to avoid returns and you want, you know, your items to sell better, then measurements are so important when it comes to selling clothing anyway. Now, a lot of you may not like selling clothing, and like I said, it's not really my favorite thing. I will say this. One of my favorite things to pack. It's got to be the easiest thing in the world to pack. I mean, just drop it into a poly mailer and you're good to go. I mean, so that part I love, but I really, you know, I don't get excited about clothing unless it's really old, vintage, or something cool. It does make a lot of the income for me on eBay. So I'm appreciative of that part. So these are, again, 501s, 28.29. I gave $4 for these and sold them for $15. Well, I'm gonna do one more, and then I'll do a part of. We'll go back to our question. How about that? And then we'll finish up some of our sales. Got some of our best sales we'll go through last. This next sale is a winter vest. It's a canvas vest. It's made by Burn. It is a women's vest. It's very nice. I actually like this. My wife even thought about keeping it, but decided against it. Anyway, I don't know if that happens to you a lot, but as I'm bringing things in, if it's ladies' clothing, my wife always wants to take a look, and every now and then there will be an item or two that she may decide she wants to hold on to for personal use, at least for a little while, especially shoes. I'm sure none of you other ladies are big on shoes, but wow. Anyway, I'll let that go. So this is, again, a Burn canvas Sherpa lined vest. It sold for $20. I gave $6 for it. These actually sell retail for a lot higher than this, and I could have gotten more out of this in another month as the winter sets in, but I've had this since last year. I got it at the end of the season last year, so I was glad to make the sale. And that's what it looks like. Nothing fancy. Really nice, heavy canvas work vest for women. Nice color too. It's kind of like a rose pink or rose red color. When I first asked this question and began, I said, you know, probably not. But then as I think about it, I would say, you know, if you're asking the question, can you make this full-time income on eBay and by reselling? I would say maybe. One thing to consider is, do you have a spouse that is also employed? And that's not, you know, to say that, oh, I'm just going to take advantage of my spouse. That's not the point. But both myself and my spouse had jobs working for the state. Now, we were under my insurance plan, but since we made this decision at open enrollment, and that's kind of how this timed out, we switched over to insurance on her plan. So we didn't have to worry about the insurance question that I brought up earlier. And that really helped. You know, and then I talked about income consistency. Well, you know, I'm in a growing phase. So honestly, right now with eBay and my resale income, it's steadily growing month by month. So that's a good thing for us. So even when it's slow for me, right now 1 month has been better than the last month. I know that won't always be the case. I will eventually kind of max out what I'm capable of doing as far as expansion and being able to keep up with listings and, you know, keep up with the sourcing for it. But for right now, we're in a growing phase. And as far as income consistency, her income hasn't changed. So we still have that we can kind of plan around and know that that's coming no matter what. And then the more I make, the better. It just supplements and kind of makes things easier. I think another thing that's really important, and this is something that, you know, my wife has given me for months before I ever made this decision, is family support. I think if you're going to make this decision, unless you are single and maybe don't have children that are depending on you, if you're making this decision and as a family, okay, if your significant other is behind you and they support it, and like I said, in my case, in fact, have been encouraging you to take this step, then it's probably a door that's at least open. That's why I say, but maybe. I still think you need to factor in all those other issues that I mentioned to begin with. But I would say this too, if you're going to be a full-time reseller, you've got to be driven. You've got to be very self-motivated. So I watch a lot of the videos. Man, I love the reselling videos. That's where it really got me hooked on this idea, not only of trying to do this as a hobby, but maybe that eventually, and I was thinking initially in retirement, that this would be a great full-time job for me when I got my 25 years in with the state of Alabama. But here I am now doing this already. And I may go back to the classroom at some point, simply because part of my reason for leaving had nothing to do with only wanting to just do reselling, but it was also family situations with my mom. Like I said, family support, but you got to be driven and you got to be very self-motivated. Sometimes watching those videos, if you're not careful, you'll get a wrong impression. You'll get this impression that reselling is easy, that it doesn't require much effort, that, oh man, I work 3 hours a day. I don't hardly work at all. I work 15 hours a week and look at all the money I make. I just do great, man. It's awesome. I buy all this stuff that nobody wants and sell it for tons of money and I'm getting rich. And I'm not saying everybody's like that. And I'm not saying that's even what most resellers are saying. So, don't blow me up in comments. But what I'm saying is, in our minds, if we're not very careful, we will begin to see it that way, because we very easily can sometimes trick and deceive ourselves into thinking one thing when we're just seeing a little snippet of information. So as I make these videos, and I've seen others make them, just know that you're only seeing a little part of the work, the time, the effort, the attention, the learning, the amount of learning time, all this stuff that goes into doing this job. Now, I'm not saying this job is extraordinarily difficult or the most difficult thing I've ever done. I'm just saying it's still a job. It still takes time and it's still a commitment. And because you have made a decision, if you enter that as a full-time job, you've made a decision to be self-employed, to rely on yourself, then you have to motivate yourself. And you've got to be driven or you won't get very far. Be very easy to pile up and be lazy and not get anything done. Again, I mentioned this already, but you got to have space for inventory. To go full time, you've got to have a good bit of inventory listed, and you've got to be consistent about listing your inventory. Now, I would say this too when I say but maybe. Results vary. Everybody doesn't get the same result. Depending on where you live, what you source, what you sell, the amount of effort you put in. I said this already, but it is about being motivated and driven. But I would say this too. You've got to be willing to learn. If you're doing like me, living in a more rural area and having to kind of be very diverse in what you sell, I sell pretty much anything that I find that I make a profit. You've also got to be learning all the time. You don't want to miss items that can make money. Now, some say that's crazy. You need to just focus on an area and be an expert in it and always do great in that area. And I mean, that may work for some. And who knows, I may even find myself there one day. But I know at this point in this endeavor for me, it's about finding stuff that has value that I can make money on. And, and I enjoy the diversity of it, but it's about knowledge. You got to learn a lot, and you got to constantly be learning. You got to build consistency. You'll hear a lot of resellers talk about setting listing goals on a daily basis. Some will build a bank up and hold them in drafts, and then from the drafts pull them in a certain number each day and just keep that draft bank built up. There's lots of ways to approach it, but you got to be consistent. You can't just list for 2 days, ignore it for a week and a half, list for 3 days really, really hard, ignore it for a week and a half, and expect things to be as consistent selling. I'm not saying you won't sell. I've seen all kinds of experiments online where some say, oh, I can list 100 items a day and not list for a week or whatever. And maybe that works for them. But I have found for myself that when I consistently list on a daily basis, I get consistent sales. That's important for me. So consistency is important. Putting in the work, whether it's listing, whether it's shipping, putting in the work and doing quality work. That's really important. You want to have good feedback. You want your customer base to be pleased, not only with the product, but with its presentation, with its accuracy, and with the way that the orders are handled. Our last items, last little run through, and then we'll wrap up our discussion as I maybe conclude with the thought, well, yes, I guess it is possible to do this. So our next item is a Tommy Bahama shirt. Now I've heard a lot of talk about Tommy Bahama not being a great brand anymore. And I would agree, it's not something that's just always going to sell for big money. You got to really find the right items. I think there's keys to all this stuff. No matter what the brands are, if it's a recognizable brand, anytime you see 100% silk, linen, anytime you see custom embroidery work, anytime you see really complex prints and patterns and appliques, if the garment takes a lot more time and effort to produce, chances are when it retailed much higher. If it's made out of a premium material, chances are when it retailed much higher. And in most cases, the higher it retails, the higher the resale will be. And so with Tommy Bahama, these silk shirts that are embroidery still do very well. They may not be what they once were, but they still do very well. Now, this one wasn't quite as desirable. It didn't have a fancy fishing design or something like that on the back, but really cool shirt. It's in black. You see the designs here. A really good size. Extra large is always a good size to run up on for a shirt. Sold that for $28, gave $7 for it. This next one also a shirt. As I've told you before, Ariat is an excellent brand. This is a Western wear and workwear brand. This in particular is a workwear type shirt. This is an Ariat FR, which means fire rated. It's in a plaid, like a plaid or check with red, black, and blue on a white background, and it is long sleeve. So I got $30 for this. I gave $8. I'd had a tremendous amount of interest in this shirt. I had different offers. Something that I'm discovering is oftentimes if I've got an item that's generating a lot of interest, but no one's pulling the trigger to buy it, and then you get some lowball offers along the way, of course, I'm usually near the market, but maybe priced just a little bit above what people are willing to pay for that item at that point, which means that they're choosing another option. And so on this particular shirt, I had it listed for $35. I lowered the price to $30, lowered $29.99. I lowered it from $34.99 to $29.99, and it sold within a day. So that was after about 2 weeks of responding to offers that were low balls, sending out offers that people wouldn't take, seeing lots of interest, and then bang, it sells. So that's one of the better sales. Gave $8 for that shirt, and again, sold it for $30. The next item, this was a no-brainer too. I got these. These are Liberty overalls, brand new with tags. Here they are. So again, Liberty overalls. There's your Liberty symbol. These are just beautiful overalls if you like those. And here in the country where I'm from, a lot of people still wear these. It's the bib style, you know, it's got the hook. These were a $34.32, brand new. Bought these at the Goodwill, and these were just in the regular pants section. So I gave $5.99 for these, and I sold them for $30. And I had them listed a little higher, but I got a good offer. I had them listed, I think, for $39. I probably could have got that. But again, I'm trying to move items. I've just found that if I don't stress over a few dollars on every item, especially these clothes, man, you can source clothes over and over and over. It's not hard to source clothes. I make more money just by moving the items. So this next item was a vintage item. I bought this at the end of last season. Like this is probably in the spring when some of the last coats were being put out on racks. Got this at the Goodwill for just the rack price. They got like 3 different price levels on jackets, and this was a heavier one, so I think this one was probably $9.99. But this is a fleece line vintage Cabela women's. It's like the chore coat or barn coat. You see a little bit of the fleece. This was an extra large. I gave $10 for this jacket, sold it for $50. Thought that was great. I think I had it listed for $59, and I took an offer of $50. Also at that same Goodwill, this has been very recently, maybe, I'm trying to think. It's been probably a month ago, a month and a half. It's in the middle of the summer anyway. I was in there and I went over to the pants section, and they had evidently just put out some new jeans in the men's section, because usually stuff like this gets snatched up. But there was a pair of Levi's 501s. Now that's not a big deal. They were new with the tags. That wasn't the biggest part. The biggest part was these were the cone denim. So these are like a special designation of 501s that they have been making that's kind of retro, using that white oak cone denim. Now they're not made in the USA, but it is using that older style fabric. So these are shrink to fit. These are just like the old style 501s pretty much as far as the designations. And it was a big size, difficult to find size, a 46-34. So I was very quick to pull the trigger on these. I purchased these 501s. Let's see, I got them for $6. That was the basic shelf price at the Goodwill. And sold them for $50. Originally they sold for $55. I was happy with that. Thought that was a good sell. All right, so let's finish up our topic for the day. So we've been talking about whether or not it's a good idea to quit your job and become a full-time reseller, or maybe just the thought, can you make a full-time living by selling on eBay and other platforms? So after the other things that I've discussed, I would say the answer is yes, with support. It's hard to do this if your family is against you, if the people in your home are not supportive of it, it can sometimes be a mess. It sometimes takes up your time at weird hours. It takes a lot of work, a lot of hustle. I would say that support is really important. I would also say you've got to look to diversify and to develop other streams of revenue. I don't think that in the long term that selling only on eBay may be the answer. I do think that as a reseller, for myself, though I'm only selling on eBay right now, I've opened accounts on other sites and I'm investigating those. I know that as the future goes on, within this next year or so, that I'm going to have to look at maybe doing some cross listing to other platforms like Poshmark or Mercari or maybe Depop, different places, participating in this reselling environment. I've been told by some locally that Etsy was good for certain products. I've got to do some more investigation, see what I want to do about that. I don't know that I will ever want to do 100% cross listing of all my items, but there may be some certain categories or niches that I need to look at posting on more than one platform. And so, of course, all of you have heard about List Perfectly. I think Vendoo's another that I've heard about, different platforms, apps and companies that assist with, that make this process of cross-listing much easier. So I may look into some of that as well. But I think you do need more than one stream of revenue ultimately, whether that comes from different platforms, other side jobs, myself, because I know carpentry work. I know that I can make money by doing a side job, building a deck or something like that. Like, for instance, I work a little side job assisting with a schooling situation at a hospital for those that are having to be in treatment. And, I make a few $100s a month from that. I can get tutoring jobs and online teaching type jobs where it's a limited time investment, but make a few $100s here and there. So I've got options. I've got options to diversify my income, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And then, of course, I'm far from having anything like an income on YouTube, but a lot of resellers have gone that route. They look at maybe filming what they do and trying to create a secondary source of income through YouTube. And so, of course, I hope to eventually get there one day. I may not ever make an income that is making me be, not have to take reselling serious, and that's fine. But the way I look at it, anything that you can get $300 or $400 out of, if you're just doing what you do anyway, and that's kind of what YouTube is for me. I'm just showing you what I do anyway. If that begins to make some income for me, that's great. And, my first experience with YouTube has not been reselling. I also am a worship leader at church, and I play guitar, and I've sang in groups and things like that, and I write music. And so I have done music and educational content in the past. And so this is just a different angle for me, not a different experience entirely. And I have experimented with that before. So anyway, moving on, a couple last things. I think whether or not you can do this depends a lot on how bad you want it, how hard you want to work, how much time you're willing to put in. Timing is key. The timing, I think, for us was forced a little, but it was right because of our situation. The last thing that I think you should consider, and when I say yes, it's yes for us, because what we consider to be a livable income is probably different from what some other people consider to be a livable income. If we required $150,000 a year total income between us to consider it, that's what we need to make to cover these expenses, have X vehicles we want, have X house payment, take these trips, do all these things, then look, we'd be way far, so far from ever getting there, So, I wouldn't advise people to have great jobs and rely on that income to do this. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't eventually turn into that kind of income. If you do it for a long time and you really hustle, you expand, you hire help, you make it a huge operation. But if you're looking to do this on your own, that type of income is going to be few and far between to ever come by. I mean, it's just not likely to happen. But it depends on what you're satisfied with. For me, and I've mentioned this before, I was happy with my teacher income, but replacing just the check that I received each month, that's not that hard. Now, if I had to replace benefits and insurance, I'd have to make a lot more money than what I'm making. And I'm not quite replacing my teaching check yet, but I'm getting closer with each month that goes by. And I do expect by Christmas to have surpassed a little bit that monthly take home that I had in the classroom. But again, it really has to do with what you consider a livable wage. If I had to take that same bring home and then take $1,000 out of that for insurance for my family, I would be another $1,000 away from even making what I was making before. Still not having retirement. You know, replacing a teacher income for me was not the issue, but I know that to replace everything else, if it was all on me and I didn't have the support of my wife, that would be much more difficult. In fact, likely impossible for me to accomplish within the next year. And so I would not have been able to have made the decision to start working in this full time right now, even with my mom's condition. I would have likely had to have put that off. All right, guys. So that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it wasn't too long. I've tried to keep it as short as possible. I'll try to edit it down a little bit. I've been trying to get the content a little shorter. But God bless you. God loves you. I love you. Have a great one. And I'll see you on the next one, I hope. Maybe just be a day or two. And I'll talk to you then. Out.